Something we were chatting there, Pauric, about, we want to share it here because it's a question that came to me recently from a dad. He says, I'd love if I was telling him that we were doing these, and he said, I'd love if you talk about boundaries. And when I say boundaries, I'm talking about boundaries of, I know that after your baby came into your life, you had your mother-in-law in your house for a while. And this dad wanted to know how was he going to have boundaries in his home. Like I was going to work with them as a doula. And so the couple knew that I had boundaries. And so I was very aware, because I'm filling in a lot of forms, I'm asking a lot of questions about what it is they want or don't want, or how they want things done, and where they're comfortable with me in their home, or, if they're comfortable with me putting on a wash and handling their underwear. But it can be very different for family members coming in. So he wanted us to talk about boundaries. He said that was an important one to talk about. So yeah, and I know you have experience of this, so without upsetting your wife or your mother-in-law.
Oh, no, not at all. I suppose I should say who I am. I'm Pauric, and I'm the dad, so I'll be talking from the dad's perspective.
Yeah, and I'm Michelle, and I'm a doula, and these are our dad and doula chats that are just for dads.
Dads. I think, no, in fairness, the experience of having my mother-in-law here was actually really, really good. It was really positive. And I think she, and then my own family who'd live a lot closer, the way we talked about what we were going to do and where our boundaries were and how we're trying to parent our baby, I think they respected us enough to go, okay, you sound like you know what you want to do. And I mean, it's many decades since I was parented when I was a young child, and my wife was, not as many decades, but, things change, and we've talked about it on those Saturday mornings, the first Saturday of the month mornings, like that. The expert advice changes every couple of years, and what was expert advice when, your mother had you as an infant isn't necessarily the expert advice now. So it's like setting that boundary. Luckily, we didn't really have to do it, as I say, because they kind of trusted that, we knew what we're at. But the thing is, a family member would say something to you that a stranger never would, and they might step over a line with the best, of intentions, but they mightn't realize that, their idea of how it should be done isn't necessarily the right way to be, for it to be done. And we've talked about it on mornings as well, about feeding and to do with cooled boiled water and all this, and that's given out as advice, and that shouldn't be given out as advice. You shouldn't be giving that to infants. So it's for us, it was very much like we had our plan, and as I say, the way we talked about it and did our work on it, that I think they could see. And even now, nearly, as I say, 2 years on, you can see the benefits of that, and the benefits of the attachment and everything else, that you might have thought it was a bit wishy-washy, I don't know, at the start, but you can see where it is. But yeah, I think it goes back to that thing. You just have to be mindful that everybody thinks that they can do the job, but ultimately it's how you do the job, is that's all that matters. And it's a thing, we've talked about it, and it's a phrase I know you use, where you have to go back to say, we're doing the very best we can for where we are right now. And that's a great phrase when you have, a family member who's saying, well, in my day, we did this, and say, okay, and I appreciate that that's what you did and it worked for you, but we're doing the best, for where we are right now.
Yeah, and I know it's something I would, when we're doing the dads to be class, when I talk about how you were parented, or when parents come with other opinions, and how, like you've just said there, that advice changes all the time. So I'm in my 50s, so my parents would have the advice would have been to put your baby to sleep on their tummy. And that was the advice then. My children are in their mid and late 20s, and the advice was to put your baby to sleep on their side. So we used to roll up one of those cellular blankets, and you put it behind the baby's back, and you put them on this. It's almost like in the recovery position. And then the next time you put them in, you put the other side. So they went in on the left side this time and the right side the next time. And that helped, you know, that they wouldn't have flat head or anything like that. And that was the advice then. So my parents and my children's parents did what the advice recommended at the time. Now we're told back to sleep, that you put your babies on their back to go to sleep, and that's best advice. So when you have another generation or somebody else saying, well, look, I put mine to sleep on their tummy, because we know that, like, often we hear people saying they don't want to do tummy time, but they want to sleep on their tummy. And it's a little bit contradictory then when we hear this. But you have somebody coming on going, no, put them on their tummy, sure, they'll be grand. Sure, like I had 10 children and they were all on their tummy and they were fine and they're all alive and well, like, for God's sake, put them on their tummy. You know, but we know that research has shown, and it's those boundaries and how, you know, when somebody comes in and maybe says that baby is starving, give it more, you know, I mean, again, in our day, there was like all kinds of stuff being put into bottles. We were given all, and we were weaned very, very young. I mean, weaning, you know, moving on to solids while still keeping either, you know, breastfeeding or alternative milks in the diet is from 6 months now. I mean, it was 6 weeks. It was ridiculous when we were babies. That's why we all have issues with our gut. But it's finding that boundary, and where, like what that dad was looking at, like, how do I say we're good? We don't need, you know, we don't want your opinion, you know, without hurting somebody. And some of the things that I was saying to him was, you know, we're really comfortable. So getting those little lines to say we're actually really comfortable with how we're parenting our baby. Thank you very much for that. We'll have a think about that, or we'll have a talk about that. And then if that person comes back and says, well, did you think about putting your baby now in your tummy? Or did you think about, you know, giving them this or doing that? Or, I mean, we hear so much, reflux seems to be the buzzword at the moment. And it's generally, again, because there's misinformation around feeding and people believing that they feed every 4 hours and, you know, and that's it. And the same amount every time. Again, this is for another conversation, but like, none of us, if we were to write down daily, if we were to do a full week's diary of what we ate or drank through a day, none of us go 4 hours and eat the exact same amount, quantity of something at each sitting. It's different. Like, a lot of us have a big dinner in the evening, we have a medium breakfast, light lunch or whatever. Maybe somebody has a snack at night, they want a fruit. Babies are the same. But it was finding those, you know, we're good, we're comfortable, we're very happy with the decisions that we're making right now. As you said, for ye had kind of discussed how you were going to parent and your family. Again, I suppose it was COVID, so you did have your mum-in-law living with you, but for your own parents, it was, you know, they weren't in your space an awful lot.
Yeah, I mean, they would have been able to visit, but it wasn't to say that there was somebody here, like, you know, they'd arrive in the morning, be here all day, you know, to help out. They just weren't, we weren't allowed to have it. We weren't really able to have it. So I suppose it helped in a way that we were able to do our own thing and then show that our own thing was working really well. And then people were like, okay, well, they don't really look like they need advice, so we won't give it. Now, I don't know if I would have had it.
We'll find another way. We'll cook them a meal, or we'll do whatever. And that really is, like, for that dad that was talking to me, he was saying, how also do I find the way of saying enough, you know, we want a bit of space. You know, or, I mean, a lot of times we hear mums saying that, you know, somebody comes in and says, I'll take the baby and allow you to do X, Y, or Z. You know, so you can go and put on that wash, or you can go make me the cup of tea, or, you know, you can cook a meal. Whereas, like, I know through my work, my role is not to take the baby. And
Yeah.
you know, that's the last thing you're doing unless you're asked to. Your role is to go and put on that wash, go to cook that meal, or to sit with somebody and listen to their story. And it's having, again, I suppose, and this is a conversation, we were talking about this as well for another day, you know, where somebody asks about how your baby is, or, you know, what your birth was like, and because they're looking for, you know, the drama or the gory details, or maybe to give their own story. They want their opportunities. They're not really interested in yours at all. So it's again having the boundaries, maybe for friends as well, in the sense that you can say, I'm not up for a visit today, or you know, that you can cancel a visit at short
Well, it
notice.
was a thing we actually did at the start. No, I suppose people couldn't come and visit so much, but we did ask, like, just give us a text before you come, because you wouldn't know what state that we'd be in, or the house would be in, or the baby would be in. And, like, at least if you give us an hour or 2 hours of, you know, a head start, we can be like, okay, you know, now keeping the house tidy, you do your best. It's not a big deal, but no, ideally people wouldn't just land unannounced, because it just, you're in the middle of everything. You don't really have time to think, oh no, now I have to entertain visitors. But in fairness, when people came here, they were very good, like, about doing things as well. It wasn't just, okay, we're here to see the baby and leave the baby here and you go off and do your thing. Like, because we had kind of, I suppose, set that boundary of, you know, with the breastfeeding and the attachment and everything, it was very important that, you know, we weren't passing her around like a parcel, you know. And, you know, even now, what I found is, if we've met people who've had babies since, and we go and they're like, do you want to hold the baby? And I'm like, well, only if the baby wants to be held. Like, if, you know, if your baby's happy there, you know, because like some people feel like that you're dismissing their baby if you don't want to hold them. But I'm thinking, like, that baby looks perfectly content where he is. So if you're happy with that, you know, there'll be plenty of other occasions for that. But there's some people are like, just give me the baby, I want to hold the baby. Like, you're just upsetting them now.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And then, and that too, I must write that down. That too is for another conversation, in the sense that we don't realize how we can overstimulate, you know, that baby by the different smells, the tones of voices, the different ways somebody holds them, and, you know, all of that, and that can throw that baby off. And then that couple are sitting that evening wondering, what the hell is going on? Why is the baby so upset this evening? But that is a conversation for another day. But it's funny how, like, you've become so mindful of that, Pauric. You know, your sound is gone. Something happened.
Very professional, knocked myself off. Before we had a baby, I would never really have held a lot of babies, because I was kind of like, I'll probably drop them and break them. But then when you have a baby, you realize, like, they're a lot more resilient than you think. They're not China dolls. But no, it's definitely, you know, I do think now, like, okay, well, if that baby looks content, you know, I say he or she, they, whatever, that baby's going to get way more out of sitting with their parent or staying where they're at, than being lifted out of a nice, warm, snug position and then handed over to me. And I'm like, well, I think you're a class baby, but I've upset you now, and that wasn't really fair, you know. And
oh, totally. Yeah.
you
And
know,
again, that comes back to, so you know your boundaries.
yeah.
And you know, you don't know, like, I think, again, a lot of times parents are thinking that, oh, I have to let people hold the baby, or you know, the baby has to be passed around, or I have to tell whether it's a good baby, or, you know, if it's sleeping, you know, all of those things that conversations are had. But that is, again, come back down to the like, what are your boundaries? And it's a conversation, like when you're doing your birth plan, how important it is to have a post-birth plan and bring that into it. Like, what, you know, and this, again, another conversation for us to have, because we are trying to keep these around 10-15 minutes. We're not trying to tie this up too much. So we're very happy if anybody who's watching and is interested in these dad and doula chats that are just for dads, feel free to make a comment or direct message either of us if you have something that you'd like us to talk about openly. Or if you want to come on and join us and talk about another topic that you have an experience with, surrogacy, adoption, loss, anything in parenting or pregnancy or birth or anything, we're very, very happy to have others join us. But that post-birth plan that so many people forget about, and we talked about that on, I think, in our very, very first session, you coming home and bringing home this baby, and had you a plan or have you an idea? It comes back down to what are my boundaries? How was I parented? How do we want things to be? And what are our boundaries probably with each other as a couple as well? Because you have to, again, go back to what we talked in another session, like what are your triggers? And for some people, the trigger is exhaustion. And so if you know that that's a trigger, then you have that in your birth plan or your post-birth plan, and know that you can say, when I get to this point, I'm not going to be responsible if I say something hurtful or mean to you, or if I F you out of it at 3 o'clock in the morning because I think you didn't put the nappy on properly. And understand that. And I think as well for dads as well, to be able to another conversation, to get in there and to find their own rhythm with their baby, and not just have that, well, look, all women know what to do. I'm sorry, but we don't. Yes, many of us have babysat, but we didn't babysit our babies. And we were much younger. We weren't the age we are now, and it wasn't a human being that we have created and brought into this world ourselves, or that we know is coming to join our family, and we don't as women know how to do this. So we're learning, and again, that couple having the boundaries between them. I suppose there's so many other things there as well. And Pauric has gone frozen on me. Oh, he's back again. That's all right. I was going to panic there for a second. We're okay. But so I think there's a huge amount really there in boundaries, isn't there? Because there's those other things after.
But definitely, and I think it's definitely something, if people are watching this, they mightn't even realize that the boundaries are a thing. But as you've listened to this conversation, you'll realize it is important, and like you don't have to be, say, an asshole about it. You can find your own way of being diplomatic, and you can take a say, oh yeah, well we'll have to think about that, and then instantly forget about it, and that's perfectly fine. It's really up to you, but it's it's like before birth, it's having a plan and knowing what the plan is, and then trying your best to stick to it when life is pulling you away from the plan, like all the time. Just do your best with what you have,
Oh, totally. And even I was just thinking there on another kind of a boundary level, when we think about it, often women can feel very touched out after having a baby, and with feeding as well. You can just feel completely touched out, and it's understanding the boundaries there on that, and sexual relationships and that, where that because your life changes, especially with your first baby. Your life changes so much from how how you were intimate, or the conversations that you might have had like before you got pregnant, or before you decided to go down the surrogacy route or the adoption, or an awful lot of people on the IVF journey, like that can be just years, and it can be such a challenge, or people who've had losses, like there are different things. But if you're fortunate enough to get pregnant when you start trying, anything before that conversation has just totally been about yourselves, and then suddenly it changes. And so it's been able to understand those boundaries within yourselves, and you know, when you need time out and when you need headspace, and having that. I think that's another conversation as well for another day. So Pauric has mentioned it a couple of times at different stages and videos, like the Saturday mornings, and that's we have a monthly dads and dads to be meet on the first Saturday of every single morning between 10 and 11, and everybody is welcome. And like, just think that it could be you coming along to share something that might help another dad or a dad to be, that you might just have something, you might realize you have that information, but as soon as somebody says something, you may just, we know this from some of the other sessions. And for anybody expecting a dad, I do dads to be masterclass with Pauric, always gives his thumbs up for. This is our dad and doula chat, and it's just for dads, about dads, for dads, and dads to be. So thank you for joining us again on this session.